Grüezi, hello and welcome to Moritz in Switzerland on a slightly windy morning for the final two heats of the BMW IBSF Women's Bobsleigh World Championships for 2023. Hello everybody, thanks for joining us again as we continue our coverage of this fortnight of racing on the world's most epic track. Martin Haven and Brianna Walker watching the action, and overnight we had German athletes in the top three, Brie, but that's not the entire story.
No, certainly not. So we start here with Laura. She had a crash in training, but she came back and she put down a really consistent day of racing, and she is definitely not out of the running for the top spot here.
Yeah, the Olympic champion saying afterwards that her first run was conservative, just get it done without crashing. Her second one upping the pace, and she did hold on to her two teammates in front.
Definitely, but Kim is right up there, only 500ths behind the leader of Lisa Bukvitz, but she also had a very consistent day with excellent starts and excellent runs.
Kim Kilicki, last year's gold medalist here in Moritz, and Lisa Bukvitz, well, she didn't take a gold medal last year. She wasn't driving last year. She was a brakewoman still, but what a great result she's had.
Yeah, she had an excellent first run, laying down an absolute blinder. Her second run wasn't as good, but I'm sure she's going to be looking at the video overnight and wanting to continue her lead here today.
In fact, I will correct myself. Lisa Bukvitz did get a gold because she was pushing Kim Kilicki to gold last year. Kira Lipperheider, her brakewoman this year, was in the silver medal position behind Mariama Yamanka, who is also here commentating for German TV. Are you following me? Do keep up. So here is our leaderboard. 19 sleds, all safely down, everything completed overnight after two heats, and some very tight battles from the top to the bottom. Now, today is very different. Yesterday, they were running in the afternoon. The track was warmer, sunnier, and we were expecting this morning the track to be quite frosty. It's not. The air temperature is not minus anything. It is positive. There was a tiny bit of dusting of snow earlier on, and so the ice temperature is probably about 15 degrees warmer and less frosty than we might expect on a standard January day in Moritz. So that's going to make a difference. The track is not going to be cold and frosty, and so suddenly they're having to look at the weather forecast last night and try and predict what runners are going to work well here.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the pilots adapt to the different ice conditions. We haven't had the ice being this warm throughout training, throughout either of the weeks here. So it'll be who can adapt best to the ice here and produce consistent runs, and that's going to produce the results for them.
Well, people at home may well be thinking, well, ice is ice. It really isn't. The colder it is, the more brittle it is, the less friction is from the runners, but the colder in the morning, like when you're scraping the ice off your windscreen, you'll be doing the same on the track here, so it does get very frosty. Well, we will go in order of their performance from the first day. So heat 3, we go fast to last. Day 2 of the BMW IBSF Women's Bobsleigh World Championships begins with the third heat. Lisa Bukvitz and Kira Lipperheider, the overnight leaders. Lisa in her first race driving on this track. The leader, Martin Haven and Brie Walker, watching the action.
With a 5:48 start, really good start for the girls. We'll see how that matches up to the other athletes as they all come down. But she has the sled going really nicely here, early onto wall corner. This corner this year has been quite tricky for some athletes, getting some height on the exit, but she was able to keep it off the wall. Really nice and smooth through the snakes into Sunny here, coming out with a beautiful straight exit. She's doing a really good job up here at the slower part of the track, heading down into Horseshoe. Really a little bit of a medium line, but she handles it well as she comes through Telephone and Shamrock. She takes a slight tap, which hasn't been uncommon this year, coming down through Devil's Dyke into Nameless and Tree. She's really picking up some speed now. She's doing an excellent job. This is a really, really lovely run here for Lisa on the third heat here.
She had 500ths in hand, over 3,700 meters of ice yesterday. And at the bottom, 108.52. Now that's half a second slower than either of her runs yesterday. But you have to compare it not with yesterday, but with what everybody else gets to do. So This morning's track prep has largely involved picking bits of tree out of the track, because we sweep through the forest here and you actually see little bits of dark branches and whatever in the track during the course of the day. But that was a neat run, almost no skidding, only 2 taps on the way down.
Really nice run here. She did take that medium line, which would have meant she had to steer a little bit harder off a horseshoe, but really early onto telephone, and I'm sure she's really happy with that run.
Honestly, as an Olympic brake woman for the last quad and starting to learn to drive, she has just absolutely knocked it out of the park this season. She has come in as at least as good a driver as Kim Kilicki and the Olympic champion Lara Nolte. So Kilicki, last year's winner, pushed by Buchwitz. This year, she's got Leni Fiebig behind her. And she raced in the Junior Worlds in 2018, Kim Kilicki, and in the World Cup last year. So she's had 2 race weekends of experience in St. Moritz. Bear that in mind when we get to Kaylee Humphries in a couple of sleds.
Kim had really solid runs here yesterday, very consistent pushing at the start. Leonie is really great brakeman, really solid, and the girls have set the fastest start for the day so far. Really good velocity through that first corner, and she's heading down into wall corner, trying to get that early entry on, and she's already up. Really great job there, girls.
100th faster at the start. They were quickest on both starts yesterday. Again, one little tap there that Lisa Buchwitz didn't have.
She's 200ths up, heading down into Nash and Dixon, probably trying to extend that lead, keeping her sled nice and straight as she heads into horseshoe. Beautiful line coming through there. The ice must be a lot stickier here today because the girls seem to be a lot more stable coming through down into the bottom section of the track.
Best speed so far and building the advantage.
She's doing a fantastic job here. This is the run that she needs in order to be able to get in front of Lisa.
Don't forget, Lisa Buchwitz was 500s in front overnight. Kilicki already has the lead.
About 1 kilometre up on Lisa here. She's doing a fantastic job as she comes through the finish with 600s up. She's increased her lead. Really good job there, Kim.
1100s quicker than Lisa Buchwitz on that run. So Leni Fiebig behind her, wearing the traditional red and white socks of the carnival in Cologne that she always races in. And 3 fastest starts in the competition. She'll be very pleased with that, and Kilicki will be very pleased with her drive as well, Brie.
Kim is a very experienced driver, and so she has all those years of experience to be able to be consistent on a track like this, and these girls should be really happy with that 3rd heat.
Kilicki was the silver medalist in both the last 2 World Championships in Altenburg. She has the early lead here today. What about the Olympic champion? Lara Nolte and Nela Skuten, as you said at the start of the show, crashed in training, spent a night in hospital. Not anybody's idea of fun, even in St. Moritz. First run was conservative. The second run, they turned on the afterburners. She was 1400ths off the lead. Can she move up as well in the heels of Kim Kilicki?
I'm sure the first day for Laura, she was just shaking off a bit of the nerves here, but she is a champion. She is, if anybody is going to be able to drive herself back into those top spots, Laura is going to be able to do that here.
Now, she was the first of the 3 sleds that actually hit the wall as she's coming in turn 1, and that takes a bit of speed out, and she's already gone to 2 tenths behind Kilicki.
Coming through the snakes here, down into Sunny. Really nice early entry on. Coming off a little bit stronger there, but not too bad heading into Nash and Dixon.
She's our reigning Olympic bobsleigh champion. She knows how to win a high-pressure 4-heat race.
No!
Oh, she's gone again out of horseshoe.
Oh, girl, no! Oh, she was having such a nice line around there, and she just didn't do enough on the exit there.
And again, her brakewoman, Nela, is hanging a little out of the sled.
Oh, she's going to be heartbroken
Yeah,
here.
they were pretty battered after their crash a couple of days ago. And that, I'm afraid, is the end of the World Championships for Lara Nolte.
Oh, the thing here with crashing here in St. Moritz is just so long to all the way down. You've got about another kilometre of ice after horseshoe there, and it's just so long. And the ice is really rough, and thank God the track workers are there to catch the girls, because often we don't get caught. If you crash on other tracks, you often don't get caught until the sled stops. as you can see here, she's coming around on a really nice line, beautiful height here, and she drives it down really hard. And what she needs to keep doing is just continue that line. And instead, the sled got picked up on the end there, and she just...
you see her tucking her head under the cowl, but Naila Skoiten there is like hanging off the back of the sled, trying desperately to stay in it.
And they came quite high up there on the end, so it would have been really hard for Naila to stay in there, so I hope she's okay.
Yeah, just getting dumped there. Unfortunately, Lara bringing it down a little early. Centrifugal force had not finished with the sled and just pushed it back up again. You're fighting against the G-forces and the inertia in the sled.
Oh, that's really hard. I hope the girls are okay.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what everybody will be hoping. All of their rival athletes, nobody likes to see a crash. Nobody likes to see one here because, as you say, you know, Horseshoe is... It's the signature corner, but it's barely a third of the way into the track. You've got at least a kilometre of ice to get down before it all stops crashing and banging around you.
Yeah, it's been a really tricky corner here this year. Like we've seen a lot of variations in the lines, and they've been higher, they've been lower, and it's just different from other years. The corner kind of the sled will turn for you in the corner in other years, but this year it's been a lot different, and athletes have been having trouble with it.
Yeah. I was talking to Gregor Staley, the track manager, yesterday, a former skeleton world champion, and he was coming down here as part of the historic race, and I was talking to him and I said, so yeah, Wall's a little bit tricky. He said, yeah, Wall's tricky this year. And Horseshoe, yeah, Horseshoe too. And Nash and Dixon a bit, yeah, Nash into Dixon, yeah, that's hard. And Snake 1 and 2, yeah, Snake's really tricky. I mean, almost every... Normally you come and you'll talk to the coach and go, oh, yeah, this year it's Nash and Dixon. That's a little bit of a tricky transition. Everywhere else is pretty much okay. Or it'll be Snake, or it might be Telephone Shamrock. This year, Shamrock Devil's Dyke is tricky, and so is Horse. Everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, Portago.
That was my next one I was going to say.
Coming here for 22 years, nobody has ever said, Portago, look out, the final corner. Never.
Yep. I remember my first run down here this year, and I've come down, I'm like, oh, it's not too bad. You know, there's a few things that we've got to fix here and there. But then we come to Portago, and you just get almost shot to the roof.
Yep.
And you come down really hard, and then the exit, it picks you up again. And, it was a shocker, really. So, yeah, there's a few tricky corners here. But as we can see that the girls are coming up, they look like they're okay. I'm sure they're going to be heartbroken. It's going to be really hard.
It looks like Laura's mum and dad there watching the action. And it's never going to be easy watching that, I'm afraid. The good news is that they are okay. You saw walking back up the German medics, and they were waiting down at the finish area, so they've gone down to just check that the two athletes are okay. I'm afraid, though, that is the end of the World Championships for Lara Nolte and Naila Skoiten. They did not complete the run, and even if they had stopped the timing beam there by that Omega clock, I very much doubt whether they would go for fourth and final run. So
yeah, and just looking at their start there, their start was quite a fair bit back from yesterday, and so I just wonder if they were really hurting and
well, we know they were when they came out of hospital. You know, they're struggling. I'm sure basically, apart from sleeping and eating, they've just been pounded by physios to try and help them recover.
Yeah, I'm sure, but
they're going off into the medical room to see the doctors there, and the concussion protocols will go into action just to check that they are both okay.
Yeah, but it's good to see that they're walking around. I'm sure they're going to be battered and bruised, and Laura will be heartbroken about that.
Yeah.
But it's good to see that they're up and about and they're healthy, and so hopefully they can recover well so they can continue the World Cup this week, because the World Cup isn't over.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 2 more World Cup rounds next week in Innsbruck and the week after in Sigulda in Latvia. Kaylee Humphries with an unexpected wait before she goes, and of course that makes a medal potential a little closer for her, because one of the top 3 sleds overnight is out of action. Just to point out, by the way, by the track, they have not deliberately made it difficult. It is handmade every year, so dumper loads of snow, hand-shaped, hand-formed, on the same path. There's only 2 walls here. There's a wall that supports the curve at sunny. There's a wall that supports the curve at Horseshoe, so you pack that with snow and ice and freeze it on. But the warm temperatures in the very end of last year and the beginning of this have made the track a little more tricky.
But that's what makes this track so exciting and challenging. I love coming here each year and working out the different changes that happen with each corner. And it's the pilot who can adapt to those changes the quickest is the one who's going to be most successful here.
Our reigning world champion, Kaylee Humphries, with her brakewoman, Keisha Love. Away they go, fourth place overnight. This is the fourth of our 19 sleds today. Kaylee first raced here back in 2005 as a brakewoman for Helen Upperton. First drove here in 2007. So she has done more races on this track probably than the entire rest of the top 10 put together. She was the world champion here in 2013, her second world title. She knows how to get the best out of this track. She is not out of it.
Yeah, and she's doing a really good job so far. Maybe a little bit of a skid coming off of a snake one there, but nice straight line going into Nash and Dixon, coming down into Horseshoe. A little high there on the end of Nash. Nice medium line coming through Horseshoe as she goes into Tree, and Shamrock there just takes a slight bump heading into Devil's Dyke.
Second best speed to Kim Kalicki, the new leader, and she is losing nothing to the leader right now. She was 2900s back overnight, 2800s back now.
Really nice lines as she comes down into the bottom section of the track. Top speed. She was rewarded for those beautiful lines as she comes through the forest.
That is Kaylee Humphries, the driver, right there. 108.41. Well, again, not as quick as the leader. Not as quick. No, in fact, that's exactly the same time as Kim Kalicki. So 108.41 for both athletes. Now, the German program have their own sled development technology. FES in Berlin build the sleds and the runners specifically for the Germans. Kaylee has an off-the-peg BTC sled built in Latvia, the same as many other drivers in the field.
But you can't say that this sled is slow. You've got, she has top speed compared to Kim Kalicki. So Kaylee really laid down a run here. She's really challenging those girls for those top positions.
She is a real driving god. And we are seeing one of the great bobsledders absolutely still at the peak of her form. And it is not over yet. So what about Melanie Hassler for Switzerland? In the World Cup race last year, she was in 17th place.
And she had an absolutely perfect run there yesterday for her second heat. Oh, bit of a skid coming around that first kink there, which is going to maybe damage her velocity. Yes, it does. She's only had third best velocity, sitting very low with her eyes just poking over the cowling as she heads into wall corner. And that velocity did damage her time a little bit. She takes a little bit of a tap coming out of wall into the snakes, down into Sunny. Bit of a wave through Sunny there. She comes into Nash and Dixon. She has to be very quiet through here. Back of her sled just breaking out slightly as she comes down into Horseshoe. Nice line as she comes around the Horseshoe into Telephone and now into Shamrock.
The speed's not there. She was 6100s behind Kalicki overnight, and she's now 8600s, and the gap is growing.
Yeah, just those mistakes up at the top of the track, maybe even out of that first king, has just cost her that speed as she comes down into the bottom section of the track. Third best speed.
She's driving the bottom nicely, but that dink on the wall right in the very first corner has made a big impact. 108.79, so 3800s slower than Kim Kalicki, our new leader, and Kaylee Humphries, who's in third place.
Really good job there, Mel. And Nads and her yesterday said that they ran it a little bit too short in that first heat. So I'm sure overnight they looked at that video and they said they knew they needed to run, but maybe they just ran a little bit too far there. And Mel had a little bit of a trouble coming around that first corner, and you could see she just went into a really big skid there, which would have damaged her velocity.
And that's what Kaylee did in both runs yesterday. Hit that wall quite hard, and that takes so much of the start speed out of the sled. Today, Kaylee was clean as a whistle. Now then, what about this young woman, Maureen Zimmer? She raced here in 2016, braking for Kim Kalicki in the Junior Worlds. Lauren Siebert behind her. They are a first-time duo. Fastest start in the second heat. First trip down, fifth fastest in the field. but only 11th in the second, so she needs to regain that first heat form. The junior world champion in mono and women's bobsleigh. She could be a big name for Germany in the next few seasons.
Oh, certainly. She's an absolute monster at the start. And look, there she is again, 5:45, but she's going into humongous skid. She cannot get the sled going straight, which is the thing at the start here. If you have a really good start, you got to make sure you get into the sled really cleanly so you can get your hands on the D-rings so you can be going down the straight nice and straight. But unfortunately, Maureen was not able to do that, and that's just going to damage her speed.
She is tagging everything in sight at the top of the track. And that basically reduces their huge start to a jog off, because all of the speed they put in, she's taken out by hitting and skidding.
Really unfortunate there as the gap continues to grow from Melanie Hassler.
Slowest sled so far.
As she comes down into the bottom section of the track, she's got the sled under control now, but the gap is still growing. The speed is just not there, unfortunately.
Well, this really leaves the door wide open for France's Margot Bock, who is just outside the top 6 overnight, 136 kilometers an hour. It's still 84.5 miles an hour. We talk about slow. It ain't slow. It's just not quite as ludicrously fast as the others.
Yeah, for sure.
But 109.71, that is a whisker under a second slower than Melanie Hassler, and she is heartbroken.
You can see that Maureen knows straight away that the top section of the track just damaged her speed all the way down.
Lauren will be feeling all of this. It's skidding sideways. She's trying not to move an inch to keep the sled stable, and it's just bouncing around from wall to wall like a pinball wizard.
I'm sure Maureen's going to learn from that experience. Just in this track, when you get into a skid there, all you have to do is pull the runners back and just hope that the sled straightens itself out. But unfortunately, Maureen was not able to get the sled straight, and we just saw her skidding all the way down into wall corner.
Kim Kilicki, our leader in Heat 3. Third heat of the BMW IBSF Women's Bobsleigh World Championships in St. Moritz. Our top 6 are done. Now then, Margot Bock and Carla Seneschal from France. A fantastic 7th place overnight. And a sloppy run from Maureen Zimmer of Germany has left the door open. If they can avoid skids, and they pretty much do, this could be a chance for Margot to move into a top 6 position with 1 run to go.
Margot had a really great day yesterday. The girls have really improved on their start this year, and Margot was able to lay down some pretty consistent runs. So she's probably going to be wanting to do the same here today so she can jump in front of Maureen into the top 6.
Yeah, starting comfortably inside the top 10 is new territory for this French duo. They have really accelerated that, and some great driving as well. In the last World Championships 2021, Margot Bock was 15th in Altenburg. She could be in the top 6 here.
Bit of a harder hit coming out of Shamrock as she goes into Devil's Dyke and now down into Nameless and Tree. She's got 5th best speed here as she comes down into the bottom section of the track, really wanting to build on that speed so she can jump in front of Maureen.
This sled was driven in the men's 2-man by Boris Van. That's why it's in Monaco colours. Still top 5 speed. Does she move up? Yes,
she does. Really great job there, Margot. I spoke to her overnight and she said that's the goal. Top 6 is the goal there, and she did an excellent job and an excellent run to continue her mission here.
I saw her coach, Bruno Mijon and Max Robert, looking very under control. I should think the girls will be absolutely bouncing off the walls with that run.
Really nice run there from Margot. A few taps here and there, but she's so experienced. She comes from a luge background, so she definitely knows how to get the sled back online when she makes those mistakes, and she's going to be really happy with that run, I'm sure.
There's Kaylee Humphries digging ice out of the sled to make sure that it makes weight at the bottom. There is a maximum weight for the sled and the crew, and you may not exceed it even by half a kilo. And these sleds, 330 kilos fully laden. So you're looking at half of a third of 1% as the margin of error.
And with the softer ice here, I'm sure as the girls come up the braking straight, there's a lot more snow that comes into the sled today.
Now, Martina Fonteneva and Mara Morel for Switzerland. 10th here in the World Cup last year. They lay 8th overnight. Could be knocking on the door of the top 6 as well with 2 good runs, but...
Oh, she goes into a skid. You can see the runner tips are going back and forth as she tries to get the sled going. So really hard steer around that second some kink, but she's got the sled going straight now. Martina did a really great job there yesterday. They had 11th and 10th best start, and she drove herself into 8th position. So I'm sure she's going to be wanting to knock on the door of that top 6 as well.
Yeah, stop hitting things, Martina. This will be her final race in bobsledding. And a great place to say goodbye to the sport, at least goodbye to the active part of the sport.
Really good lines in the top part of the track. Really nice line out of Horseshoe. I'm sure she's going to be rewarded with that, but the speed is not really there. The 6th best speed as she comes down into the bottom section of the track.
Now, her target will be to try and get ahead of Maureen Zimmer. Maureen had nearly a second in hand over her after 2 heats.
Oh, big skid as she goes into Marta. I'm sure she wasn't really wanting that. Just a little bit of pressure in the sled as she comes around into Partago in 7th place.
109.38.
Not a bad drive there. I'm sure she has a lot of local knowledge, but just unfortunately didn't have the speed and is still 2 tenths behind Maureen.
Yeah, she's been racing here for more than a decade, so she has got plenty of knowledge of this track in all its various different vagaries. She had a tap or 2 at the top, and here's the shot out of Horseshoe.
Really nice line here, probably the best that we've seen so far. She didn't have to do a lot of steering to get the sled down off of there, but she just had got a bit of pressure as she came out of Gunter Sachs going into Martineau, which sent her into a skid.
So Martina Fonteneva lying in 7th place at the moment. Next up is Wai Mingming. 2 Chinese sleds back-to-back here. The races within the races that we like to talk about between the teammates, and they were 200s apart overnight. So 100 per 1,852 meters of ice between the 2 of them. First up, Wai Mingming with her brakewoman Wang Zhuan.
Wang Zhuan is actually 11.70 runner, so she has some wheels behind her there. And Mingming had a great second run yesterday. The 7th best run time. Oh, and you can see she went into a skid, but she tried to get the sled straight. That's what experience tells you. And she was coached by Pierre Luders, who knows how to drive in this track and teaches those athletes just those little things that you need to know to get the sled running straight when you head into a skid.
Things like leave the bar out, concentrate on getting around the first corner cleanly, then you've got a long straight, you can bring the starting bar back in. Just little details like that. It's important to get the corner right, never mind the bar.
Certainly. And she comes down into Horseshoe really early. Lovely line as she comes around. I think her back end just tapped there a little bit. She taps out of Telephone, taps out of Shamrock. Isn't going to really help her speed. She got 8 best speed coming down into the bottom section of the track.
For her, it's really the battle with Ying Qing. Last year in the World Cup race here in February, she finished in 18th place wide. So right now, this is a top 8 run.
With top 8 speed as she comes down into Martineau and Potago. Really nice job.
The only sled that was slow, of course, is Lauren Alter's sled. That was upside down at that stage. But it is, I mean, yeah, 18th last year, and to be in the top 8, that is a huge improvement. It's basically the same track, it's basically the same sled, it's basically the same driver, and yet in a season she is improving to be a regular top 10 contender.
It's really good to see that the Chinese are still involved after the Olympics. Often the Olympic program team drops away, but these girls seem to be really involved and really still in it, and really able to improve on their driving. As she comes around Horseshoe, not a bad, really hard steering, and then the back end just hits her, and the front end as well, which would have sent her late into Telephone.
I think the overall, there's Y on the left, I think the overall improvement in the driving is the biggest thing with the Chinese men and the women. Don't forget, in 21-22, they didn't race in Europe because they weren't allowed to get out of China for travel reasons. So she and Ying Qing here are both really improved.
Little known fact, the first time that I raced these girls was actually at World Juniors here in 2018. And so these girls have been driving for quite some time, and they know how to drive this track very well.
Now, not as good a start, but better velocity than their teammates out of the first corner. So the battle is on between Wai Mingming and Ying Qing.
She takes a square tap as she comes out of wall into the snakes. Bit of a hard steer as she comes down through the snakes into Sunny. Nice straight line as she comes into Nash and Dixon. A bit of a skid there, but she comes into Horseshoe nice and straight. bit of a height on the end there. She just needed to drive it down a little bit more, and the consequences is a domino effect of getting taps out of Telephone and Shamrock.
Now she's got better speed on board than teammate Wide. She's closing the gap. This is going to be very interesting. She's overhauled her teammate. This is a good third run from Yingqing.
Nice line as she comes down into Marta with 8th best speed here.
Now, is she going to get ahead of Martina Fonteneva? How close will she be? 7th best run, 109.50. She's jumped Y, and she is 1500s behind Switzerland's Martina Fonteneva. That is how much improved these Chinese drivers are in the last couple of seasons.
There was a really tight race between Martina and the two Chinese athletes, so I'm sure we're going to see a real awesome heat, a 4th heat here between these three. But like I said, she just had to really drive the sled down off the end of Horseshoe, and she got a tap there and then a tap there out of Telephone. It's just a bit of a domino effect out of those corners. There's not much straightaway between the between those three corners, and that's a consequence of that.
Well, Martina Fonteneve, Wai Mingming and Yingqing of China. 3 sleds were covered by 400s in the first heat. The gaps have opened up a little, but the positions have changed. Outside of our top 10 overnight, Cynthia Appia with Niamh Hockey back behind her. They've swapped brakemen, Niamh and Erica, between Cynthia Appia and Bianca Reeby all season long.
Really nice steering around that first corner with a 5.56 getaway for these girls. And she comes down into Wall Corner with a nice early entry on, nudging the sled over right. Bit of a wave as she comes through. She's really high on the end of Wall with a hard hit there. She comes down into the Snakes. Bit high on the end there of Snake 2 as well as she goes into Sunny with a bit of a wave. She's got the sled back under control. Oh, a harder hit between Nash and Dixon. Sled's just skidding out a little bit as she comes around Horseshoe, and again, just their back end's just clipping the last corners. Like I said before, it's a domino effect. If you start hitting between those 3 corners up there, it's just going to cascade all the way down.
It's only her 2nd time driving on this track. 2 trips here as a brakewoman as well in her former career.
Really hard steering as she comes down through the bottom section of the track with 9th best speed and big skip between Martineau and Patago.
Disappointing run for Cynthia Appia, I'm afraid, 109.35. It was a little quicker than we've just seen from Yingqing of China, but there's a lot of errors creeping in there.
Yeah, I'm sure Cynthia is going to be able to go back up to the track and just see that those taps just cost her the speed, and she's going to be hopefully able to improve on that in the 2nd run.
Watch the runner tips there. She's almost out of the drive lines and starting to steer into that first dink just as she comes underneath the camera.
And really high there on the end of Wall, almost the highest we've seen so far. Luckily, it took her the square tap, which sent her back into the Snakes. But like I said before, her back end's just skidding out there, and it just would have cost her speed.
That wasn't too far from parking it off Wall, which will be the first time we've seen that. Nicole Vogt next up with Jasmine Jones behind her. First time driving in St. Moritz in a race for Nicole Vogt. So nothing like going in off the high board.
Nicole's had a really good season here, it being that it's her first full season on World Cup. Lots of learning, and she's doing a great job here with her brakeman, Jasmine Jones, who's actually returned after becoming a mum just within the last year. And it's great to see that mums are still involved in the sport. It's a difficult sport when you're a mum to be able to travel the world and still train as hard as you need. And I think Jazz is doing a great job here.
And I'm sure new mum Alana Myers-Taylor will be back next year as well. She starts to build up to Milan Cortina 26.
As you can see on the track, that the track is starting to get more and more sleds over. It gets a little bit slicker, so maybe that's why the girls are having a little bit more of a trouble to control the sled, because as you can see here, Nicole is just, the back end is just getting a little bit loose as she comes down with the medium line through Horseshoe into Telephone, and Sachs taking into Shamrock, taking that hit.
But good speed, look at that, 5th best speed. She is our 12th sled down. That's going to help her close on the sleds in front. She was just 2100s behind Cynthia Appiah of Canada. That will be the target.
Really nice bottom section here. 5th best speed. Bit of a skid as she comes into Potago.
Hits the wall, but the 9th best run. She does not get ahead of Wai Ming Ming or Cynthia Appiah, but she closes a little at 109.63.
Really good job. The girls had the 12th best start, and Nicole was able to drive herself down with the 9th best run time. Really good job there, Nicole. You should be very happy with that.
When it starts to come together, it must feel really good.
Not bad lines as she comes down through Sunny, but a little bit of pressure there, which obviously sent her into a skid into Nash and Dixon.
So, whole new world for Nicole Vogts on the right and Jazz Jones on the left-hand side, learning a whole bunch of European tracks. Innsbruck and Sigulda are going to be the same as that. But look at her, she's absolutely stoked with that. Next up, Andrea Grecu for Romania, with Teodora Vlad behind her. Andrea has driven in 5 different race weekends here in her career and been a brakewoman probably in as many again. Finished in 18th place last year, but in 2018 she was the junior world champion on this track in women's bobsleigh.
Whoa, big skid. She probably
Same as heat 2.
She couldn't get her hands on the D-rings, or she got them on quick enough and just didn't have it go square out of the grooves.
Did exactly the same yesterday in the second heat.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember that, but that's really unfortunate. So that's going to damage her speed as she comes down really high off of wall there. She goes into the snakes, probably thinking that she needs to get the sled back online and minimize the errors as much as possible, but the back end is just skidding out, which is only going to damage her speed more.
Yeah. The more sideways you get, the slower you are.
Not bad coming through Telephone and into Shamrock, getting the square hit as she goes into Devil's Dyke. Bit of a wave through there, down into Nameless and into Tree Corner. 6th best speed, so she has really high line in bridge. We haven't seen one as high as that. She hasn't quite got the sled under control. And
look at the way her head's rattling around. You can see the violence of the transitions.
I just don't think she was able to put away the mistake that she made at the start there, and it just cascaded all the way down.
It's actually a quicker run than Nicole Vogts, but if you watch the video without the timing, you would not think so, would you?
No, certainly not. She just couldn't get the sled under control there.
I'm trying to remember if it was in the 2-seater or in the mono, but she's had 2 or 3 times now where she's gone right into the first left-hand corner out of the start groove.
She just out of the start groove.
That was her getting in.
Yep. She just couldn't get her hands on the D-rings quick enough out of the grooves, and the sled just went really hard right into that first corner. She was very, very, very lucky to get the sled going straight there, but it doesn't help when you go skidding into that first kink like that.
Sure doesn't. Now then, here's Bianca Ribby for Canada with Erica Voss behind her. Raced here in the Junior Worlds in 2021. That's Bianca's only time on this track. 2 12th place starts yesterday, 2 14th place runs, and 3 tenths behind Andrea Grecu. Leaves the handle out, sorts out the first corner, gets the handle in when everything is quiet.
Really good job, Ruby, as she comes down into wall corner.
First World Cup season for Bianca as well, so most of these European tracks are going to be new to her. And it just means so much learning all the time. You've never got that comfort blanket of knowing where you're going.
And she comes down into Sunny, a little bit of a tap there, into Nash and into Dixon. A bit high there on the exit, but she was able to handle it quite well. Coming around through Horseshoe, Telephone and Shamrock. Bit of a tap there, but not too bad. Not the worst we've seen here so far.
Doesn't quite have the speed of Andrea Grecu, but if she's tidy down the bottom, those numbers will look a lot better out of these 4 corners. The transitions are much more relaxed than Andrea Grecu's.
13th best speed as she comes down into Potago.
And across the line, 109.31, so 23 hundredths quicker than Andrea Grecu. She was 3 tenths behind her, so that really closes the margin right down. She's now 3 hundredths behind Nicole Vogts and only 8 hundredths behind Andrea Grecu. So there's, again, just on the fringes of the top 10, a 3-way battle covered by 0.05 of a second.
Really good run from Ruby. She actually had the 6th best downtime in that run, so that's why she's able to close that gap between her and Nicole really nicely, and she should be very happy with that run.
That is cool. They should be happy with that. So Bianca Ribby and Erika Voss next up. Victoria Chernanska and Lucia Makrosova. Youth Olympic Games and the 2021 Junior Worlds are the only appearances on this track for Victoria Chernanska. And Chernanska took silver in the Youth Olympics in 2020. That was in the Monobob. And now she, of course, is in the 2-seat sled as well. So having to learn, unlike some of the more experienced rivals like Kaylee Humphries, who's had years in 2-seat bobs and having to learn the Monobob, Victoria is doing exactly the opposite.
Victoria's been coming along really well in the last few years, really challenging herself as a young athlete to step up into the World Cup, and she's doing a great job. This is all about experience for these young pilots, and being amongst the older pilots who have got far more years of experience. She's doing a great job in challenging herself, and I'm sure she's just going to come up through the ranks in the next few years.
She was 3 when Kaylee Humphries first raced on this track as a brakewoman, 5 when Kaylee first drove. So it's exactly right. This is not the next generation. This is the generation after the next generation following the likes of Kaylee Humphries onto the ice. And that just keeps building the level of competition in this women's field.
Yeah, and that's what we need. We need the youngsters to be able to come through to continue on the legacy of the sport. And Victoria, along with Popescu, is doing a really good job of that.
Yeah, all of our fronters are going, I would have got away for it if it wasn't for those pesky kids. So Chernanska, these are really nice lines, and she's been rewarded with the speed as well, isn't she?
Yeah, 7th best speed as she comes down into the bottom section. Little bit impatient off the exits there. She comes down into Martineau again, 7th best speed. Really good run here from Victoria.
Getting away with it. This is going to be a top 7 or 8. Oh, okay, 14th. It looked a lot better than it was. Now again, you know, only a couple of trips, a couple of race weekends on this track, one of which, of course, was the Olympics. I wonder whether the coaches are, with some of the less experienced athletes, giving them slightly narrower runners for more control so that they can actually have a better run, and that builds the confidence for the future.
For sure, that could definitely be a possibility. As you see here, she comes around to Horseshoe. Really nice lines. You can see that her eyes are tracking down as she comes, and she wants to thread the needle through the exit there. Really
Again, just 20, so still developing physically. She's starting 17th, 18th in the field, driving herself into top 15 runs. So, yeah, the body will catch up with the mind. Kim Kilicki is our leader, Heat 3 of the Women's Bobsleigh World Championships. Into our final 4 sleds, Giada Andriuti and Tania Vicentino for Italy. Only race on this track for Giada was in February last year in the World Cup, the last event before the Olympic Games.
These girls have been working together for such a long time. First, Tania was a pilot, and they were always had such good camaraderie between them. And now Tania has decided to jump in the back of Giada's sled as they head towards the 2026 Olympics.
Yeah, trying to put the best of everything together. The last Olympic medal in bobsledding for Italy was Gerda Weissensteiner and Jennifer Isacco. They claimed a bronze medal in Cesana 2006. So will there be an opportunity for the Italians to do so again?
Really nice line as she comes through Horsham, down into Telephone and now into Shamrock. Bit of a tap there as she comes down into Devil's Dyke with a bit of a wave. Not bad lines here from Giada. She's doing a really good job.
Nice smooth run so far, very quiet. You always hear the mistakes here as well as see them.
Nice line coming into into Martineau and now into Portago. Oh, really high line there, which hasn't been uncommon to see this year.
That was an uncomfortable dismount, wasn't it, on the final corner?
No, it's a tricky corner here this year. If you miss the first steer, your sled goes really high, it dips down very low, and then you just get picked up there on the end.
That's like the uncomfortable landing off a really good routine on the parallel bars. Suddenly, boom, oh, didn't land that great.
Well, at least Tania knows that they're at the end there. Yeah. Really nice line. You can see, though, she's steering quite hard. She maybe just let the sled come around a little bit too much, but not too bad. She handled that quite well.
Little tap in the forest. So our Italian duo are down. 3 sleds to go in the third of 4 heats in this Women's World Championships. Martin Haven and Bree Walker watching Riley Compton and Emily Renner. Riley has not driven in St. Moritz in any races before now, so still venturing into unknown territory.
Loaded quite early there. I'm sure we'll see how her start time is. A 5:76 for those girls, but she's got the sled going really nice and straight down into wall corner.
Not the biggest physical athlete, Riley Compton, so running it far further probably not helping. Much more important to get that speed through the first corner without tapping.
Not too bad as she comes off wall into the snakes. A little bit high on the exits there, and she got a little bit of a tap as she comes into Sunny. Little bit of a tap coming down into the flatter section of the track. You really want to be quiet through there because that can damage your speed that you've built from the start. Not really hard off of a horseshoe there. Coming down into Shamrock. Another hard hit there from Riley. Sure, she's going to try and get the sled back online here. She comes down into the bottom section of the track, trying to keep the sled nice and smooth to build that speed, but really hard again as she comes into the bottom section. Bit of a skid now into Martineau.
Well, her first experience of St. Moritz has been on the toughest St. Moritz track in a couple of decades, probably. 109.92 downtime, 109.95 for Giada Andriuti just in front of her, so she's grabbed a few hundreds, but there was a near half-second deficit to the Italians, so she closes in a little.
Riley's still a junior here, so I'm sure being a part of this World Championship event, she's just here for the experience. And you know what? You always see her smiling no matter what. And she's just one of the most friendliest athletes going around. And she seems to be just enjoying being a part of Team USA on the World Cup circuit this year.
Yeah. A whole new experience for her. All these different racetracks, different towns, and so much to learn. So one more race run to go here in St. Moritz after competing in the monos last week. Same for Georgetta Popescu and Antonia Sabu. Georgetta's only race on this track was the Youth Olympic Games in 2020. That too was a 4-heat encounter, and she came out on the top step of the podium, the Youth Olympic champion in the Monobob.
Nice line as she comes around that first kink to get the sled going straight. As she said, she's a world youth Olympic champion on this track here, so she knows how to drive this track very well.
And she had the best of the competition a couple of years ago, and in fact her brakewoman Antonia Sabu was also competing as a driver in the Youth Olympic Games, finished in 18th place then.
As we should mention, the Youth Olympics is actually on Monobob sled, so there's not on the 2-men. So for Georgetta to come and compete here in the 2-men as well is such a great thing for the sport. We've got the youngsters coming through that are going to continue the great tradition that we have in our sport.
So the women's monobob race was last week. We had monobobs in action over the last couple of days as well, with the Parasport World Championship sharing the same ice the same weekend as all their other counterparts in men and women's bobsledding.
Nice line as she comes down into the last corner here.
That was a pretty decent run, wasn't it? 1:10.18.
Not too bad, and for these young girls, like we've said, it's just about experience here, and that run was really nice from Georgetta.
But again, gaining the experience and building the confidence in the young athletes. Georgetta just 20 years old.
The Romanians have such a strong development program. There's so many youngsters, boys and girls, coming through the ranks. And often you see in Eagles, they have the Romanian championships each year. And there's so many athletes there. It's so mind-blowing that such a small country like Romania is able to bring out so many new athletes each year.
So final sled in third of 4 heats of the Women's Bobsleigh World Championship from Poland, Linda Wyszewski and Marika Zandeka. Linda, another driver who has not raced on this track at all in her career. And she is just 23 years old. She has started before this weekend precisely 5 races and finished 4 of them. Her brakewoman, Marika, 27 years old, World Championship debut for her. And this is her 5th bobsleigh race. So we are bringing in athletes who have barely even got a speed suit, and they're in the World Championships. That's the rate of progress.
Really nice as she comes down into wall, trying to nudge the sled over. Bit of a wave as she comes through wall. She's really high on the end there, but she got the square taps sending her into the snakes. Early into sunny, bit of a wave there too, but really hard steering out. She comes into Nash and Dixon, gets a bit of a tap between those two. Now into horseshoe. Not a bad line as she comes down, but she got a hard hit there and a hard hit between Telephone and Shamrock. Like I've said before, it's just a domino effect between those corners because there's not much straightaway between them.
So much of the steering here is about subtlety, isn't it? Easing the sled on and off the corners.
You really have to be smooth on this track. You have to make sure that you drive it, but it's got to be smooth driving.
Great speed down on the bottom. Her 9th best speed. She is our 19th sled on the ice. And a 109.93. She did a 110.01 and a 110.03 yesterday, so that is her fastest run of the competition. And actually, almost nobody has gone quicker this morning on the slower, softer ice than they did yesterday. So that's her learning. That's her just looking at the video overnight and polishing up the details.
Not a bad line, but she steers it really hard to get off a horseshoe there, and the back end just gets a really hard whack there as she heads into Telephone, and it just cascaded from there. She got a hit here between Telephone and Shamrock. Oh no, out of Shamrock there, heading into Devil's Dyke.
Well, brakewoman Marika got bounced up in the sled as they came down at a horseshoe. I'm sure she knew all about that. Nevertheless, they were all down and dusted, and they are in 18th place. But there has been a change at the top of the leaderboard as the times overnight suggested. Just 500s in the lead was Lisa Buchwitz of Germany, but Kim Kalicki has overhauled her and now has a 600th of a second lead. Do not think it is all over. Kaylee Humphries, 2400s back. She's a double world's champion in the last 2 worlds in Altenburg in Germany. She won her 2nd world championship title on this track in 2013. Boy, would she love a 5th back in St. Moritz. It's all to play for. Melanie Hassler in 4th ahead of Margot Bock, and then Maureen Zimmer in 6th, with Martina Fontenay leading another tight group of sleds. And the group behind, Greco, Vogt and Ribby, 500ths of a second covering, or 800ths of a second covering those 3 sleds. So that is going to be pretty intense as well. Well, that is it for the 3rd heat of the BMW IBSF Women's Bobsleigh World Championship. 4th final deciding run will see us go from last to fast with our 18 remaining sleds, and we will be back at 10:30 10:30 local, easy for me to say, 9:30 GMT, 04:30 Eastern. We'll see you then. Bye for now.
Allen. In der Zwischenzeit kurze Pause.